Hi there, I'm Mabel Chan, and this is One in a Billion. How would your conversation with your father be different if you found out that his time was running out, which means your time was also running out?
He spoke about the first 12 years of my life with him and how those were probably the good times that we did have together.
That's New York-based writer-editor Mimi Wong. She and her father had a strained relationship, which was something she talked about in our last episode, Searching. But what she couldn't talk about then is the reason why we now have a follow-up interview. Mimi had no idea her father was dying when I first interviewed her in early spring. She had no idea why he suddenly called one day at the height of summer, and 2 weeks before the first day of fall, her father died at age 87. In the few weeks that they were able to talk and saw each other in California for the last time, they were each finding what really mattered in the end. Here's my conversation with Mimi. Since our interview, your father actually surprised you with a phone call. Tell me about that.
When we had spoken, I hadn't talked to my dad in a year, I think, at that point. And then a few months later, he actually called me out of the blue. I was really surprised to, see his name pop up on my phone. And, I was kind of cautious about what he was going to say or why he called, but he seemed intent on trying to reestablish communication between us. And I think maybe he was also acknowledging that it had been a while since we'd spoken and he wanted to reach out. I even brought up our previous phone call and how it didn't end so well. And he actually apologized, which I found surprising. I took that as a sign that he was willing to work on our relationship. He admitted that maybe he was in a bad mood that day, and he said, "I'm sorry."
Oh, wow. And you were very surprised that he said he's sorry.
Yeah, I was surprised because I'm used to my father being kind of a stubborn man set in his ways. So, if I were to read in between the lines, I would say that was kind of a big admission for him to make.
Well, at that point, what did you say back? How did it make you feel?
I was actually pretty tearful on the other end of the line just because, it had been so long and I had all these sort of pent up feelings, but I felt willing to give this a chance if he was too. Part of my issue with my dad was that a lot of times our conversations and our relationship would sort of boil down to talking about money. And I explicitly told him that I didn't want that to be the only basis of our relationship. And, I said that honestly to him, and I'm not sure how much he really heard me, but it felt good for me to say that to him.
So you wanted to seize that opportunity when he called you to really let him hear you talk about what bothers you about your relationship?
I think at that point, I just felt like I have nothing left to lose, so I might as well be honest about my feelings, which for me was also challenging because that was something I was not used to doing with my father.
After that, you called him back or he called you a couple more times? What happened?
I felt like we had reopened communication, and I know that my father was getting on in age, and I think he was openly talking about planning for the future. So this was something that we had started talking about more and more.
At what point did you find out your father was running out of time?
In August, I actually called him just by chance, and he told me that he was sick. He didn't actually spell out any diagnosis, but he seemed to hint that it may be nearing the end for him. And that was really shocking for me to hear. That was the first that he'd kind of been that forthcoming about it. Previously, he maybe hinted that he was getting old and that, anything could happen at his age. That was the first instance that he suggested we may not have very much time left.
What did he say? What was he diagnosed with?
Well, he never actually told me his diagnosis. I had to find out from family, and that he had late stage cancer. He didn't want to talk about his cancer diagnosis, and that was made pretty explicit to me. I flew back to California to try and spend time with my dad for a couple weeks. He was doing in-home hospice care and I think was very reluctant to see people. So my time with him was limited. As he neared the end, he seemed more open to not only talking, but he seemed more open about what our relationship was. I never wanted to deny that we had a very complicated and imperfect relationship. But at that point, I wanted to just appreciate what was there, the good history that we did have.
Yes, tell me about that.
When my father lived at home with my mom and me, and I do have really good memories of that time period. And that's probably how I want to remember him as my dad. It was just later in my adulthood that our relationship became more strained and more complicated.
You had mentioned that you wish you had more time. If you had more time looking back, how do you want to spend those times with him?
My one regret is that, I didn't get a chance to hear more about my father's life directly from him, because maybe that would have helped me understand why he was the way he was and maybe why certain things were so difficult for him. But at the same time, it's hard to dwell on the regret because I wonder about the timing of all these things. Part of me thinks that the only reason he reached out was maybe because he knew that he was dying and that was the impetus for him. And so maybe without that, we would have never even gotten a chance to reconcile in this way.
Can you point out some things that he said or some things that you have said that really stay with you, that may have been what you go to when you miss him?
Something interesting that did happen, my father asked about my partner, and that was something we had not ever talked openly about. It was something I brought up in my essay that, it's very common for second generation children to not talk about their boyfriends or girlfriends until maybe marriage is on the table. But, knowing that my dad didn't have much time left, I opened up about my boyfriend of 8 years. He seemed pretty happy for me, which was sort of unexpected. He expressed an interest in hearing about who this person was and hearing the details about this person's life. To me, him asking questions and showing curiosity was a nice sign.
Well, good for you. He seems happy for you.
I hope that that was the case.
You had mentioned that you wish you knew what he thought of you. Did you accomplish that in the time that you had with him before he passed?
That's tough to say. You can never truly know what goes on in the other person's mind. What was important for me, or what I will take away from the last few interactions we had, was that, I got a chance to tell my father that I loved him. I meant it. I heard him say it back to me. And I think even if we would have never truly understood each other, I do believe that, we tried our best.
This is fantastic. I really am grateful that you were able to connect with him that way. I also wonder if you thought about the idea of reconciliation between you and your father.
I would say even the day my father died, I went to go see his body, and I was still filled with a lot of anger. But as I sat there, I knew that it wasn't healthy for me to hold on to this anger. And I really tried to let it go and tried to say goodbye to him. Now that in some way the relationship has come to a close, I can sort of take my time to process that. I'm at an age now where a lot of my friends are also going through, similar issues or have experienced this kind of grief. And so being able to share that with people close to me has been really helpful. But I think a lot of it is going to be kind of internal reflection, to think and reevaluate and re-examine the story that I had told myself about my father that might change over time.
How is your relationship with your mother changed by this sudden death of your father?
My mom and I have always been really close, but now we've had to lean on each other even more. And so, that's a relationship that will continue to be really important to me.
What mattered most in the end for Mimi and her father was to pour out what had been weighing on their hearts and minds, thoughts and feelings that neither could find the right time or right words to deliver. Unspoken love, unexpressed apology, untold desire. As Mimi takes time to find closure and to search for clues about her father's personal history, I hope that she will always bring to mind the courage they both had summoned that day to say, I love you. If you'd missed part 1 of my conversation with Mimi, check out episode 8, This Asian American Life, Searching. In our next episode,
Asian Americans know a lot about their journey to America, how they got here, and the sacrifices that earlier generations made coming here. What happened to those who got left behind?
That's Scott Tong, who decided to trace his roots and unearth his grandparents' history while working in Shanghai for American Public Radio's Marketplace. He'll tell us what surprised him most in his new book, Finding My Name in a Chinese Village. That's in 2 weeks, November 12th. One in a Billion is
Brian Latwinowicz,
Yvette Yu, Maggie Shi.
And our lovely theme song is composed by Brad McCarthy. Let us know if you want to join our team of volunteers, help us plan events, pitch a story. Just go to our website, oneinaBillionVoices.org, and find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Support for our podcast comes from our collaboration with the Victor and William Fung Foundation.